Okay.
Okay.
So my question, Dr. Dawson, is with students who have so many executive function skills to be addressed, how do we prioritize?
Okay, so there are a couple of answers to that. Um, One answer is whichever skill is impacting the child's performance in the classroom or their behavior.
Right.
That's the place to start. Um, and very often that's response inhibition, the ability to control impulses. So that's often a good place to start. But the second answer to that is in terms of a hierarchy of executive skills, because there are ones that emerge earlier than
Mhm.
others. And so I generally encourage people to focus on any of the first six, which would be response inhibition, working memory, emotional control, flexibility, task initiation, sustained attention. Those and the later skills like planning and time management and those things, they're really built on the foundation of those
Right.
earlier developing skills. Um, so that's my general recommendation. The other thing I would say though, because you do have kids with multiple executive skill challenges, is there's a danger in trying to tackle too much too
Mhm.
fast, because then the kid's going to feel terrible. I mean, first of all, it's hard to keep track of what you're
Right.
doing.
Yes.
But second of all, the kid's going to feel like every time you turn around, oh, they're on me for this now. Or even when you do it in the most encouraging, positive way, it still feels like the kid's trying to work on too much
Right.
at once.
Dr. Dawson, what can both parents and teachers do to mitigate the effects of working memory deficits on our students' ability to develop success in both academic and daily life activities?
Right. That's a really good question because my guess is with your population, working memory is a particularly challenging executive skill, and I think it's important probably to look at that as a lifelong challenge. That kids can develop compensating strategies and kids can improve. Um, but my guess is that for kids with language based learning disabilities, working memory is always going to be challenging. So I guess the answer to that is that the goal should be is not to get students to have great working memory, but to get them to be independent in accessing strategies to compensate for weak working memory.
Mm-hmm.
So, because I think what we tend to do, and we should do when they're young, is we cue them, we prompt them, we give them all the reminders they need. But eventually, they're going to have to get to the point where they say, oh, I better create a checklist for this, or oh, I better use this strategy. So that's what we really want to get them to do is to think about, okay, I know I have trouble remembering this. So what am I going to do to um, to to adapt for that? Um, and and that may be, so so one way to do that is to model what you're doing when you're working with kids. So you're saying to them, okay, let's create a checklist because this is going to help us remember. And then after you've done that, or let's put a reminder right by the door to help you remember what you need to bring to school. And here's why we're doing this, because remembering stuff is hard. And then as time goes on, rather than just giving them the strategy,
Right.
you can say to them, okay, so what? We've done different things before for trying to remember stuff.
Mhm.
So what do you think would work for you in this particular case? Or is this a situation where we need a cue? We need a way to remember. So I guess that would be my answer to that.
Okay. So, Peg, a lot of our parents say their child holds it together all day in school, but when they come home, they fall apart. What suggestions do you have for these parents?
Okay. And that's a very common issue. And it arises because these kids work twice as hard in school than the typical student does. And they are overwhelmed. And that's true with kids with dyslexia. It's also true with kids with ADHD, which surprises people because when you have ADHD, you look like you're not even trying. But in fact, you're working really hard to try to contain your body or contain your focus or stuff like that. So that's very, very common. And I guess the two things that I would, two pieces of advice I would give to parents is, first of all, be understanding and supportive. Um, don't try to shut the kid down. I'm sure parents don't do this, but you wouldn't want to try to shut the kid down if they're feeling overwhelmed or they've got all these emotions. Acknowledge the emotions. Yeah, today was tough, wasn't it? Or give them time to decompress. And explore with kids what will work for you. I mean, for some kids, it might be immediately going outside and running around. For other kids, it might be retreating to the bedroom and just vegging out for a while. For some kids, it might be being able to watch a favorite TV show, even though parents try to restrict things like that. I mean, you want to keep the time limits short so they're not spending the entire afternoon in front of the TV or the entire afternoon playing video games, but to recognize they need something to sort of bring themselves back to their center, and exploring with them what would work for them, so that the child has some choice. Kids know themselves better than anybody else, so it's a question of exploring with kids. So what would work for you? So I think that's the main thing. I've also had, and I don't know whether this would work in your school setting, but that question came up in one of my seminars once, and the school counselor said that they were working with a kid for whom that was an issue, and the way they resolved it was the last 15 or 20 minutes of the day before they left for home, the kid came down to the school counselor's office and just sort of vegged out there, and the mom reported afterwards that made the transition to home a whole lot better. So that might be an intermediate step if you got kids who are really sort of falling apart when they get home, if there were any way that you could sort of find the space for them in school to sort of begin that transition to home. But otherwise, I think that just having parents give kids the space and acknowledging their feelings, a lot of reflective listening. Wow, this was tough, wasn't it? And then down the road, you might be able to can you think of one thing that happened today that was really fun, so that you can try to sort of turn them to remember the good things about school. But I wouldn't move to that directly, because then the child's going to feel like, wait, you don't get my feelings, do you? so I think
Great, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Can you recommend any specific study strategies for students with test-taking anxiety?
Yeah. Around the test anxiety, there's sort of two issues there. One is study strategies, and the other is strategies they can use in the testing situation. And so I tend to think more about test anxiety in terms of what can they do in the testing situation to manage their anxiety. But if we're thinking about study strategies, what gets challenged when kids have test anxiety is working memory, interestingly enough. So test anxiety is a problem with emotional control. But if you have trouble controlling your emotions, you become overwhelmed by those, and then your working memory goes. And for taking tests, working memory is huge. So one of the study strategies I would recommend is, whenever possible, teach kids or get kids to use graphic organizers. So if they're studying a bunch of material, can they pull out the key themes? Like, I always use this example because it's easy to talk about the causes of the Civil War. So you pull out three main causes of the Civil War, slavery, states' rights, I don't know what else. And then put those in bubbles, and then connect details underneath them. If you visually organize it, then when the kid goes into the testing situation, they can picture the bubbles, and then they can picture the details that extended from that. So it's easier for them to reconstruct the information. It actually gives them an anchor or a tool to access their working memory in the testing situation. But let me just talk briefly about the actual testing situation, because that's another issue as well. Doing some kind of relaxation going into the testing situation. I had a teacher once who said that when they did classroom tests, she started by just spending a minute doing deep breathing the entire class. She said it made such a difference in terms of kids' ability then to approach the test without as much anxiety. There's a breath technique called square breathing. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Yeah, where you intake 4 breaths, hold your breath for 4 counts, and then out for 4 counts, and then wait for 4 counts. And what that does is it increases oxygen to the brain, which helps with relaxation as well. The other sort of test-taking strategies we often recommend is a couple of them. They're two different ones. One is, if you've got stuff in your head you're afraid you're going to forget, as soon as you get that test, just start writing that stuff down, little notes and reminders. So it's a data dump, basically. Get out everything you think is going to be on the test that you're afraid you're going to forget before the test. The other strategy is to go through the test quickly and identify which questions you can answer right away and easily, and which ones you're going to struggle with, and start with the ones you can answer right away, because that's going to build your confidence, and you can get it done quickly, and then that gives you more time to handle, the more difficult items.
Thank you.
Okay.
My question has to do with long-term projects. Here at Cambridge, we have a long-term science fair project that many of our children have planning challenges with. The project lasts about 8 weeks, and it's a struggle for both our students and our parents.
Right.
Do you have any suggestions for how to help them plan such a project to make it more manageable and enjoyable?
I'm not sure about the enjoyable part. I can talk about the other. Enjoyable, ideally, the more kids have some say in what the project is, the more enjoyable it's likely to be. It might also be possible for parents to sort of review the project with the child in advance and say, what part of this looks like it might be the most fun? So to sort of prime them for looking for fun and enjoyable, I guess would be a place to start. I emailed Ellen about this before because I saw the questions in advance, and my first comment was, this is tough because I'm not sure we really should be expecting kids to be doing long-term projects at home.
Sure.
And put the burden on the parents. And she wrote back and said, well, at least through 5th grade, the projects are done at school, which is great. And so I do think after 5th grade, you can begin to ease kids into doing these kinds of projects at home. Ideally, the plan is pretty specific on the part of the teacher, because the more it rests on parents to make the plan, the harder that's going to be, because parents will have different ideas about how this should work. I saw a study a couple of years ago that looked at long-term projects and the impact of parent support on long-term projects. And what it found was obviously that kids who have parent support do better on the projects, but they broke it down still further, and they said, actually, the kids who do well are the ones where the parents understand the project. Parents don't understand the project.
Sure.
So it feels like the school at a minimum should be communicating very clearly with parents about what the point of the project is so that they understand it. If there are rubrics involved, making sure they're written very clearly so that parents understand. And then I think, again, ideally, the project should be broken down into small pieces that are very clearly designed so that parent and kid know exactly what they have to do on every day. If that's not happening, and it's expected that the kid and the parent are going to do that, then what I recommend is break it into as small a number of pieces or as small in terms of length of time and effort, making those as small as possible. So it may mean starting that project the day it's assigned with a task that will take no more than 5 minutes, and then gradually building up. I'm thinking maybe even creating a timeline. So if a parent had a whiteboard, they could create a timeline. I mean, I think of checklists, but with a project that has multiple steps, it feels like a timeline that would show here's the beginning, here's the end, here are the steps to get to the end. And you can just cross off each step as they do it, but they can see that there's this flow that goes across time, as opposed to, I think of time as sort of horizontal and checklists as being vertical, so I'd rather go with the horizontal. Also, I think, and I just keep coming back to this in terms of engaging the child in helping create the plan. So again, if the plan is not specified by the school, then the parent and the child should sit down together and say, okay, we got this thing to do, let's make a plan. What feels effortful should govern how much time how much you break something down. So if any particular step feels like overwhelming to the kid, then that's the step where you said, can we break it down into smaller pieces? And it's going to be different for every kid. So it has to be a conversation between the parent and the child as they create that timeline, and as they try to figure something out. And I guess the one other thing I would say to that, and this applies more generally not just to projects, but anytime there's something particularly challenging that a child has to do, if the parent can build in something that the child can look forward to doing as soon as they get that piece done. Whatever, and it'll vary from kid to kid, but something, because what we found is just having something in the back of their mind that they know they get to do as soon as they get this piece done acts as an energizer. and it acts as an activator, so you're more willing to sort of jump in and get it over with so that you can go on to that fun thing.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So many of our students have difficulty starting a task. Often our parents tell us that at home their child is easily distracted and have difficulty getting started on their homework or an assignment. What suggestions would you have in decreasing task initiation at home and also in the classroom?
Right. Okay. Let's primarily look at home, because home is more open-ended than the classroom is, and you're right, that is a problem for parents and kids. I think, and I may have talked about this last night at the parent meeting, coming up with a plan with a start time, but again, engaging the child in that discussion. I mean, certainly, often I hear parents say, well, they need to get the homework done right after school because then they have the rest of the afternoon off. And that is true, but there are a lot of kids out there who need to go out and run around. Or I've also had parents say they have to get the tough stuff done first because then they can coast after that. And again, kids often do have more energy early in a homework session to do the tough stuff, but if that tough stuff is so overwhelming, then they're going to put up a struggle for that. So in both cases, engaging the child in, okay, I know you need some time to go out and play, so let's talk about when you want to start your homework, and let's come to some agreement. If the kid says, 8:30, then I think we need to rethink that. So can we try 5? All right, are you willing for 6:30? I mean, it is something of a negotiation. And also just in terms of, and that's why the plan should include, what are the things you have to do? And some thought about, let's think about the order in which you want to do these. And it may well be that the child would choose a different order than the parent would like them to. But the parent could say, okay, I was thinking we might want to start with math because I know you hate that and then you can get out of the way. But let's do it your way tonight and see how it works. And so that the child has a chance to try out different strategies. But I do think, I think getting the child to agree on a start time and then making sure the child starts. Remember, that was the deal. We're going to start then. So let's get started. And then I guess the other thing is around task initiation. Sometimes kids don't want to start because it feels like once they get started, it's one long slog. So for those kids who fight even starting it, will they agree to work for 10 minutes and then take a quick break? So you're shortening the work sessions to accommodate a kid who just getting started seems deadly because then they know they're in prison for the rest of the evening. So.
All right. Do you have any strategies to help parents of children who have difficulty getting themselves ready in the morning?
Yeah, that's a problem. My favorite one, for those people who have access to it, is an app called ChoiceWorks. If you're familiar with it, it's a smartphone app. I think it's available for both the iPhone and the Android, where the parent can go in and set up a morning routine. And ideally, the way to do it would be with the child. Let's talk about the things you have to do to get ready for school in the morning. You can select, there are 2 ways of doing it. You can select the pictures that app offers you for brushing your teeth or eating breakfast or getting your backpack ready, or you can actually take photographs of the child doing it, which is probably even better. So you can take a picture of the child brushing his own teeth, getting his backpack ready. Then you can decide what order those things should be done in. You decide how long each should take, and you may want to time it with the child. So let's see how long it really takes you to eat breakfast. We'll start the stopwatch and then just see, and then we'll know. And then you can program it so when the child gets up, they click on the first activity. It starts the timer. When they're done, they check it off like it's a checklist, and they go on to the next one. So it just walks them through. The other nice thing about that, and the reason it's called ChoiceWorks, is it's giving kids choices. But if they get the morning routine done with 10 minutes to spare, then they have a choice about what fun activity they want to do before they get ready.
So there's a bit of a reward.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
Yes. Yep.
Wonderful.
And then I guess the other thing I would do if parents don't want to use phones for that kind of thing is again, always have a visual, because if you're relying on the kid remembering what the routine is, then you're always having to prompt them. You still may have to prompt them with a visual, but the prompt is, okay, check your list. what's next on your list, which is a gentler way of getting kids through a routine and feels less like nagging. But I think the main thing is figuring out what are the steps involved, how long will each take, and then sort of doing this backward analysis. So what time do you think you have to get up in order to get through the routine so that you have 10 minutes to spare, and can do something fun. And then the other piece I would recommend is if you look at that list and you know it's going to be a problem, is there anything on that list that could be done the night before? I've had parents tell me that their kids sleep in their school clothes. Since the clothes are clean, the bed is clean, and then they don't have to worry about the kid getting dressed in the morning. So I think you got to be creative.
Minimizes the demand.
Yeah, exactly.
So along similar lines, speaking of routines and proper hygiene, what can parents do at home to establish an improved nighttime routine in order to help their child get to bed at reasonable hours? This is becoming more of an increasing problem, especially with our older students.
Absolutely. Yeah, in fact, there's a term for it. It's called bedtime procrastination. And it's not just a problem for kids. It's also a problem for adults who just keep putting off, they're on their own technology. And so, and that can sometimes make it worse with kids when they see parents sort of doing the same thing. Similar to the morning routine, I would start with what time do you want the kid in bed? And again, that may need to be a negotiation with kids. And I think it's important for parents to understand, and this may make things difficult, but when kids hit adolescence, which is when they start having more control over their own bedtime, their sleep patterns change. So the typical teenage body wants to fall asleep at 11 o'clock. If you make them go to bed at 9, that's probably not going to work particularly well. And so, you might be able to get them in bed earlier than that, in part by building in a bedtime routine so they can relax in bed reading a book or something like that, maybe listening to music. You do not want them on technology. That's the other piece. For two reasons. One is technology sort of stimulates kids, and so that makes it harder to calm down. But second of all, the blue light that's on even smartphones as well as laptops actually disrupts the sleep process. And so that makes it harder to fall asleep. So, the experts suggest, and this is totally unreasonable, the experts suggest that people should be off technology for 2 hours before bedtime. Is that going to happen? No. So I'm thinking that's another negotiation with the kids. But I would be looking for at least 15 to 30 minutes off, ideally an hour. If they are on technology, you can get something that takes the blue light out. In fact, on the iPhone, it's now called Night Shift. So it's in the settings, so you can go in and check out Night Shift, and it turns the screen amber. So it takes out the blue light. So at least you're not disrupting the sleep process in terms of the blue light effect. So that's one piece. And again, I would go back to creating that visual timeline, using a checklist, check your list, and probably with teenagers, because again, it's more of an issue with teenagers. I'd be working out rewards and consequences, so that kids understand that you're serious about this, and that sleep is huge. And none of us, especially kids, especially when they have busy days. Nighttime is, once they get their homework done, that's their time. So they want to put off sleep as long as possible. And we as parents just have to sort of take a hard line about that one, I think.
And as students become older and their hygiene needs change, how do we encourage or support their transitioning and increase flexibility?
What do you mean by the increased flexibility?
So they can become a little bit more flexible
right.
and understand that their needs have changed and they have to do things a little bit differently.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I think giving them gentle feedback about either how they look or how they smell will help.
Honesty.
Yeah, honesty. And it may, I remember when that happened with me, I remember it was a friend of my mother's who said to me, I think your daughter needs to be taking showers more. And so that was like one trial learning for me. You know, oh God, my best friend's mom is noticing this is a problem. So, and so getting that, if you can figure out a way to give that honest feedback to the kids so that it has the biggest impact on them. And sometimes the feedback may have to come from friends. I mean, I'm not sure you'd necessarily plant the seed for that, although it'd be interesting to think about it. But yeah, and maybe even, you know, taking a picture. If it's just, I mean, like for me, it was the greasy hair. You know, if someone had taken that picture and said, here's what you look like. Now let's take a picture of what you look like after you've had a shower in the morning. That may make a difference.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great questions.